So let's talk about some things that prove my point. First of all, the subject matter alone is the determinant, and it's hard to talk about it in a way that is calm. Time is running out. I'm getting old. People have shown an appalling ability to ignore my struggle and my truths. I'm being drugged, and when I read, I kind of get a headache as a result of the fumes in the air and the drugging, which I have on record. Several witnesses who have sampled some of my drinks, and they found that they were drugged. I believe they have some kind of a mechanism to make it so that I'm being drugged, some kind of a process, some kind of a mechanism. Maybe it's in the containers, don't really know what it is. And they're fuming as well. Okay, and my mom having asthma, on the days they fume me more, she coughs a lot. It's a dead giveaway. You know, when you've grown up in this household, I've lived with them for a long time. You see the signs that something's in the air, right? There's a fire, she gets sick, and so on. You know, you see the physical symptoms, you hear the coughing. It doesn't take a genius to see that I couldn't possibly be mistaken about this. So now that we've established what kids should have picked up on from the start, let's talk about the Zeta Rebellion and the quote-unquote Beta Triumph, as it's referred to in Silicon Valley. Now keep in mind, this is an information age. It's not limited to Silicon Valley. There's colleges all across the nation, all over the world. There is a beta male triumph, okay, in the minds of cowards and fools. It's certainly accepted by mainstream society. The Zeta Rebellion it's a bunch of beta males who refuse to be defined as such. Instead of saying they've triumphed as beta males, they want people to redefine the order. Now let's think about the importance of this. When you go hunting, right, and you're getting older, right, you're becoming a man, you're coming of age. It said you're out with the big boys, you're out with the fellas, you're with the men, okay? So now there's degrees of masculinity, as you can see. The people who are more manly than others, okay, it's more respectable to be with them. You know, my teacher is the top martial artist. You'll often hear this with, I don't have a teacher, obviously. I'm using that as an example. You'll often hear this with kids saying, my teacher is on the Olympic Taekwondo team, as was my cousin's teacher. He says, I used to say when I was younger that my Kung Fu teacher, I didn't go there that long, was world famous, right? He's famous for Kung Fu, and it was true. Okay? So people say these things. So there's degrees of masculinity, there's degrees of proficiency, and it is socially normative for them to be acknowledged as such, and for people to assign respect, for them to get experience economic advancement, and the admiration of potential wives. I've gone over this time and time again. It is disrespectful to not acknowledge them as such. Why do people bow their heads in martial arts? But is it limited to that? Do you just bow your head to God and say a quick prayer? Well, some people are shallow like that, and that's where it ends for them. They're stupid. And this is part of Western culture. It is to do superficial gestures and to not have heartfelt, profoundly deep activities and behaviors. Over the time, with the corporations gaining more and more power using technology and the advancements in psychology and techniques of social control, we see that the society has become more shallow. So as they claim to attack religion, like the atheism, for the betterment of humanity, as we see New Age movements emerge, different spiritual movements emerge, you'd have to be extremely and intensely delusional not to see that this is based in shallowness and materialism. On IQ Squared, I believe it was, TED Talks, one of those, there was a lecture called a deeper materialism. Okay, a deeper materialism. I don't think there's a single ancient person who talked about spirituality that didn't reject the idea of going more toward the material to understand the spiritual world. It's insane. And they would take drugs, they would do shamanistic rituals, they would do martial art rituals, they would kill people, sacrifice people, all kinds of stuff, right? Sacrifice people, sacrifice the material. That's what it's symbolic of. It's insane not to see it that way. And certainly killing somebody is a martial arts activity, right? Who, what, when, where, how, why goes back to the moral code and the different cultivations that occurred quite often in the same sort of area that were rivaling with each other. Over time, Horus established himself as the archetype of Pharaoh because this specific form of martial arts, which has to do with the distance the hawk strikes down. He strikes from a distance at a high speed and strikes his opponent who's trying to outmaneuver him, right? Whether it's a rabbit, a bunny, or something, some kind of field mouse, a squirrel, whatever it may be. Okay? He strikes them from a long distance and fast. This translated into a human who has a more thin aerodynamic shape, right, with muscles that a muscle structure that he's cultivated in that cult to perform that task and that strike. No performance-enhancing drugs or Western technologies involved. Natural. The hawk does not take performance-enhancing drugs. He does not go to the gym. He doesn't have scientists with little sensors on his body determining how he can more effectively perform the movement. He naturally cultivated it over generations. And so it is with the martial artists. And so it is where the respect should be assigned. Your ancestors were smarter than all these guys, your forefathers, whatever you want to call them. And therefore, you've cultivated a superior mind, body, soul. The three came together. There wasn't, oh, this guy has the body, this guy has the mind. No, this guy might have a Western technological kind of form of intelligence, in terms of science and technology, but he doesn't have the spiritual intelligence. What the West has done is they've taken a bunch of shallow sluts to help them do it, a bunch of cowards and bullies, and they're trying to force you to see it their way, okay, and say science and religion are compatible. They are not. God meant us to use the naked eye. He meant us to use understanding nature as such to define who he is. God didn't give us microscopes. He didn't give primitive man. Why would he deny primitive man the tool he needs to understand him? What, you think he wanted these materialistic, corrupt, world-contaminating pussies to understand God and not the primitive man that he made in his image? It's stupid to see it that way. Certainly, he meant for us to naturally understand nature, to understand why animals don't fight to the death for mates, why they do a form of sparring. Sparring also involves a form of contact, which at times can kind of hurt you, right? Hitting hard, the brain is fragile, causes brain injury, neurological impairment, cognitive damage, as does drugs. So when to fight is also important. You can't just say, now, let's just kill those guys and take over. No, there's a moral code. Who, what, when, where, how, why. It has to do with your cult and your spirit animals and your martial arts philosophy. Pure sun temple, pure light, pure truth. Let's put everything on the table like a man, not covert aggression, relational aggression, which they call raw, trying to stigmatize the idea through stigmatizing the word. Word play, phonetics, the Phoenicians, the phoenix bird, a symbol of reproduction to the Greeks, based on the Ben bird or Bennu bird, who is associated with Ra, at least in one period of time, by the Egyptians. Straightforward, no way around it. Now, what kind of a shallow, cultivating evil type of bitch would let anything come between her and Pharaoh? If he chooses you, submit to him. Everybody else is evil and a coward. They're not rolling with the big boys, so to speak. They're not rolling with the top martial artist. They're rolling with the corrupt, kleptocratic state and the movements they have allowed for and sponsor. If you're not directed to the psych ward because you're talking truth, see Ra, see Rays. Why? Crazy. Okay? You're seen as crazy. They give you recreational activities, even in the psych ward, to recreate yourself. Mental health says, don't try to find yourself, reinvent yourself. Don't religion, rejoin Ra Legion. Reconnect. Don't connect to God and the source of your spirituality and your existence, but rather reinvent yourself with science, technology, psychology, and a bunch of sluts you'll probably never fuck. Putting a carrot on the stick, being their body, being your dick, symbolically, your own dick's pleasure. Thinking with your dick, thinking with your lower self, being immature, being childish, being a little kid reading porno magazines, saying, I'm going to do whatever it takes to fuck bitches like that. It's cowardly. It's pussy. It's little kid shit. The noble man should get the woman, and if he doesn't, she never grew up. I tell you the truth. The noble man, the top martial artist, and those rolling with him, his shipmates, his teammates, so to speak, his team, should get the most attractive women. They should get the best of everything. It is immature, it is evil, it is dishonorable, disgraceful, and disrespectful if they don't. If your culture doesn't lead to elevating Haru in his pure, tall, dark, and handsome martial arts form, his rightful place, or his sabotage form. How much more when he's sabotaged? How much more do you owe him? Do you owe somebody when you don't do them wrong? Or when you do? What happens when you owe them already? You owe me my rightful place and everything that would have came with it. And then you owe me for having sabotaged me and not stood with me. When the hero comes around, you should be inclined to give him the things he would naturally have, that he's supposed to have, if things are done morally, in a way that's morally sound. That's why the people in charge are moral relativists. That's why they're Neoplatonists, and they make the arguments like evil doesn't exist, there's just shades, there's no light without dark, the arguments of scientific cowards. Chemical sadists, sexual sadists, scientific racists, inferior forms of life that must be called out as such. Why? Because they claim superiority. They claim to be smarter because they're richer. They say, if you're so smart, why aren't you rich? It's a criminal system. The corporation, hell, the mafia in Cuba, the Bay of Pigs, right? The Bay of Pigs, cops, corrupt cops, the corporation. Connect the dots. The black boar, the black pig, Set, who was conquered by Horus Narmer Palit. How could you not understand? Even the palate, right? Your palate, okay? Digestive tract, okay? Floating around in your stomach. I went over the fire of men. I'm not going to go over that anymore. Make a long story short, I can contain my anger when I go off the top of the head and there's less fumes and less drugs in my system. I can sense what is wrong with me. I can sense what's wrong with me and my opponent and outmaneuver him and exploit it. How dare they even for a moment suggest that they are more sane than